Welcome back, WNST, the Ravens season, but it's all sort of settling in now as the Cleveland Browns make their way in here this week. The Ravens trying to fish through injuries and dust themselves off after a very, very nice start to the season. Luke Jones joins us now. He will be out on the fields in Owings Mills all week long, as will I at various points this week in preparation for Cleveland. And Luke, I don't think it goes without saying that everyone realizes what this game represents, but also on the backside of this, the London thing's next week too. And, a big task there with the Jacksonville Jaguars, who looked better this year, just on a small sample size down in Houston over the weekend. But this is a very, very optimistic version of the Ravens between weeks 1 and 2 that this is about as good as it gets. I don't know what more you would have wanted to see from them on Sunday other than some tweaking, and you want to see the offense, you want to see them throw it a little better, all of that stuff, but there's not a whole lot of complaints going on in Owings Mills this week.
No, there's not. I mean, the offense could play a lot better. Let's not pretend that the offense was a juggernaut, but they didn't need to be on Sunday, and the one thing that I wrote about at WNST.net, and we talked about this after the game, that season-opening win just brought a little bit of a different feeling. Consider this. The Ravens, since Super Bowl 47, the number of times they've beaten a team on the road by more than one possession, 3. The number of times that they've beaten a team by 20 or more points on the road, 2. I mean, it's just something that they haven't done over the last 4 years, and it's a big reason why they've been, as mediocre as they've been since Super Bowl 47. To see them do what they did, and look, Cincinnati's offensive line in the end may end up making them much more like the Cleveland Browns than Pittsburgh or the Ravens in 2017. But until we know that for sure, and even if that is the case, you just look at how the Ravens have profiled the last few years. How can you not be excited, intrigued, potentially altering expectations when you beat a team 20-0 on the road? It's just something that doesn't happen very often. In general, it's certainly not something the Ravens have done of late. And to shut out a team on the road for the first time since 2009, whether that's a good team, whether that's a really bad team, and who knows, maybe Cincinnati is really bad. It's just something that gets you excited, and to know that the Cleveland Browns are coming to Baltimore for the home opener with an opportunity to improve to 2-0 before they go to London. And as you pointed out, one, it's going to London. They've never done it before. We've seen lots of teams, let's face it, a lot of those London games have not exactly been pretty to watch over the years. And you are going up against a team that probably has the potential to really give them some headaches with that Jacksonville defense. Now, I don't think the Jacksonville offense is going to be all that dangerous against the Ravens defense either, but I think that one, you want to be 2-0 going to London, knowing that you're going to be dealing with that, knowing what looms after the London trip, a home game against Pittsburgh, and then you go on the road against Oakland, which is going to be a bear of a task. This sets up nicely for them to improve to 2-0, and then know that they're going to have a kind of a crazy week next week. That just goes with the territory when you're playing one of these international games. But no reason you can't look at this one and be excited and think that there's no excuse for not being 2-0 come around 4:30 on Sunday afternoon.
Well, let's talk about the aftermath of this thing and Danny Woodhead and Zadarius Smith. And, welcome to the season, right? I mean, we thought the offseason sucked for losing players. Wait till they go out there and play 60 minutes every week, that we're going to be week to week. And the Woodhead thing is particularly disturbing because of how good it looked in the beginning. It was kind of like this, shooting star. And I don't know the next time we'll see him out there, but certainly that sort of wrinkle in the offense. And I'm just saying stupid stuff now, but couldn't Mike Campanaro take a couple of those snaps or, sort of similar sort of skill set kind of thing in that offense, that if they wanted to run a play or 2 or 3 to have sort of a matchup advantage to some degree? I
think so, but the problem that, I'm going to bring it up here because I've talked about it with both these players. You can't count on these guys to stay healthy.
They're small. That's the nature of the game, I think, right? I mean, when you're 5'7", staying healthy when 6'6" guys are Brent Urban's tackling, it's tough to do.
Yeah, and every time someone points to an example of a player who was a little more diminutive, a little shorter, smaller, they always point out the exception. They don't point out the norm. This is why, as much as I have really enjoyed watching Danny Woodhead over the years in the NFL, I think anyone who's watched him of late, he missed most of 2 of the last 3 seasons with injuries. So, and when you hit 32, you're not going to, if you're someone who's injury prone and you get to the wrong side of 30 in this game, the violent nature of this game, that's probably not going to get any better. It's probably going to get worse. So we'll see. John Harbaugh didn't have anything definitive on Woodhead, but did not sound like this was going to be a hamstring injury that he comes back from in 2 or 3 weeks. This might be, I don't know. I'm speculating to a degree here, but I wouldn't be shocked if you end up seeing him on IR with the thought that he's someone that they would bring back after 8 weeks. If it's a grade 3 kind of hamstring injury, then that's a 2-month injury typically. So it looked bad. I think anyone who saw him grab his leg and go right to the ground, you could see that this wasn't just a tiny little tweak. He probably, there's probably a tear there. So we'll see how that plays out. You hope you don't lose him for the season. You hope you get him back here at some point. In the meantime, you have to figure this thing out because, I think we saw on Joe Flacco's interception, even though that wasn't a great pass, that Terrence West, not really someone you're looking to throw the ball to a whole lot. I think Buck Allen quietly could morph into that role a little bit. He's not quite as elusive as far as just, I think, being a quick twitch, sudden kind of runner like Danny Woodhead can be when he's healthy. But I think Buck Allen showed his rookie year that he can be someone who can be productive as a receiver out of the backfield. I think Campanaro could certainly fit into that category again, but you always have questions about his durability. So, I think, for better or for worse, they were really counting on Woodhead to kind of give them that dynamic as a receiver that they haven't had coming out of the backfield since Ray Rice. You hope you get that back at some point, but again, I think you be realistic and understand that he already had the hamstring issue in training camp. He comes back and doesn't even make it through an entire quarter before pops it again. That might be something that could be an issue for him all year long and could keep him out long term. So, that's tough because you saw how productive he could be. He still ended up being their leading receiver from a reception standpoint on Sunday, which, 1, shows how productive he was early, 2, shows how little the passing game had to do over the course of 60 minutes on Sunday. But that's a dynamic they need because, let's face it, Joe Flacco's checked down a ton the last couple of years, to his detriment at times.
And Dennis Pitt is not there anymore.
Right. It is not there. Kyle Juszczyk isn't there. Kenneth Dixon isn't there, who had kind of quietly emerged to be part of that down the stretch last year. So they're going to have to figure that out. You need someone underneath who can break some tackles, and maybe Michael Campanaro can do that a little bit for them. But their other running backs don't they don't project quite as well in that category. And here's something that it didn't rear its head as much on Sunday. Because they didn't throw the ball a whole lot after getting the lead in the second quarter, and certainly they hardly threw the ball at all after intermission. But Danny Woodhead quietly really good in pass protection, and that's something that they identified, knowing that they had lost Kyle Juszczyk. They're different players. Kyle Juszczyk's a fullback, and Danny Woodhead's this small 5'8" kind of running back, but he's someone that they were really looking to have him on the field, not just as a receiver on third down situations, but also to help out in pass protection because he's good in that regard. So that might kind of be the sneaky, tough part of this injury because I know they've worked at it. I know they've the coaching staff believes they've gotten better, but Buck Allen and Terrence West, pass protection, not something that's been a strength of theirs early in their NFL careers. So that's going to be a challenge for them to try to figure out this Danny Woodhead role, how you try to piecework it together. Yeah, you can use the tight ends a little bit more. Yeah, you can use Michael Campanaro. Yeah, you can use Buck Allen. But
well, they didn't throw the ball enough last week for us to even try to figure out, what they're trying to do with Ben Watson or what they. I mean, obviously they threw the ball to Nick Boyle at one point, and I guess that's a shocker unto itself because he's considered a blocking tight end. But that's not a bad little weapon once in a while either.
Yeah, I mean, it's Nick Boyle caught the pass. I said this to you. I don't have incredibly high expectations for their tight ends. I think they're fine. I think if you're looking to one guy to kind of pop, if one of them pops, you're hoping Max Williams does it. But Max Williams played the least out of those three. Benjamin Watson, I think, is a great story to come back from the Achilles, but he's 36 years old. I mean, can the Ravens count on that again after Steve Smith was able to come back and be productive? I mean, at some point, old guys just, at some point they just can't do it anymore. And I think that Watson did a nice job as a blocker, considering that's not really his forte. But can he show a little more explosiveness to be a little more of a factor as a receiver? We'll find out. But you said it. I mean, we really didn't learn much of anything about this offense other than against the Cincinnati Bengals front at least, and that's a pretty good front, keep in mind. They were able to run block pretty well. They were able to have a functional, effective enough running game to protect the lead, which is good. Now, if you're in a 17-13 kind of game in the third quarter, is it going to be good enough to continue to just run? That remains to be seen. And that's certainly something that we'll find out as we get a little bit deeper into the season. But overall, beyond that aspect of it, and even pass protection, we really didn't get a great gauge on it. Joe got hit. He was under some duress. I didn't think their pass blocking was horrendous, but I didn't think it was great either. So that part of it remains to be seen. But the other aspects of this offense, including Joe Flacco himself, we really didn't learn a whole lot on Sunday. And I'm not sure we're going to necessarily learn a ton about them playing at home against the Cleveland Browns, who, to their credit, I think Cleveland is better. I think that roster has gotten better. I think the big key for them will obviously be if DeShone Kizer can be their franchise quarterback. And I know he's done some nice things for them, including, he had his moments even against Pittsburgh in what was a close loss. And really would have had a nice game had Kenny Britt not dropped a critical pass at one point in that one. But overall, again, the Ravens, there's no reason they shouldn't handle this Browns team playing at home. Maybe playing in Cleveland later in the season ends up being a little bit of a different story with Kizer getting some more seasoning and the rest of that roster being better. But no reason to think the Ravens shouldn't handle this team and handle them. Maybe not a 30-point win, but definitely should be a game that come the 10 or 5-minute mark, you're feeling pretty comfortable and you're hoping it's celebration time in Baltimore.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter as well as Luke at WNST.net. And we do hope that the defense will translate, right? I mean, that's all part of this thing. We talk about the injuries and the problems, but the pass rush was there. Suggs' health now becomes, I think, a pretty key issue, right? I mean, you talk about aged players. We talk about guys breaking down and problems. Suggs has had that happen to him a couple of times at a less advanced state. He clearly appears to be in the best shape of his career, but he's got to be a guy they're going to have to count on, especially if Zadarius Smith's not out there running around after the quarterback, right?
Yeah, and we'll see about Zadarius Smith. I mean, John Harbaugh, the indication that he gave on Monday was that it was not a structural issue with the knee. I don't know if that means he had a high ankle sprain and it kind of looked like the knee, and sometimes you can kind of get into that territory where it's tough to decipher one or the other just by looking at a replay. I know they called it a knee sprain initially, but Harbaugh said as he was having his MRI on Monday that they didn't believe that it was a structural issue with his knee. So I don't know. Does that mean he had a fibula injury? Is it something of that nature? Did he have a high ankle sprain? We'll have to find out. But you're right. In the meantime, clearly they're hoping Terrell Suggs doesn't break down. That's always going to be a big part of what their defense looks like, at least in this modern era. But you need to see guys like Matt Judon and Tyus Bowser and probably Tim Williams being in the mix now, at least in the short term until Zadarius Smith gets healthy again. You got to see them coming off the edge. The part about their pass rush on Sunday that I think was actually because it didn't show up statistically quite as much, I thought they got a really, really impressive push inside. Brent Urban, I thought Brandon Williams, even though he didn't have, he didn't have 2 or 3 sacks or any kind of numbers like that, I thought he pushed the pocket really effectively. I thought Michael Pierce did a nice job inside. You mentioned Zadarius Smith looked like their best defensive player before he got hurt. That's how much of an impact he was making early in that game. But it was good to see them get that inside push, especially against a quarterback like Dalton, who's only 6'2". You get that inside push on a quarterback that isn't quite as tall, that isn't the statuesque kind of guy that a Joe Flacco is, or other quarterbacks that are 6'4", 6'5". It makes things really difficult for them, and that's why we saw the Ravens able to bat down so many passes against Dalton. But they've got to replicate that. They've got to be able to do this every week. It's great to have a shutout. It's great to play at the level they did, force 5 takeaways, have 5 sacks, bat passes at the line of scrimmage. They did all of it. They checked every box you'd want them to check on Sunday against Cincinnati, and don't take anything away from them. Even if the Bengals end up being terrible, the Ravens haven't done that against bad teams. They haven't
on the road, especially
on the road. That's look at their last 5-6 years going to Cleveland. They haven't blown them out, and the Browns have been terrible. So it's definitely a tribute to what they were able to do, but it's got to translate. It's got to continue. Keep in mind, this defense was number 1 in the NFL statistically going into the month of December last year, and we saw what happened. One Jimmy Smith injury essentially caused a collapse. So do I think they're better equipped to handle a potential injury to him now? Yeah, because I think you saw Marlon Humphrey, who ended up playing a little bit. In fact, it was interesting. They almost used him in the same way that you see defensive linemen and edge rushers kind of rotate in and out. It's kind of interesting that the Ravens have the luxury of having another outside corner that they like enough to tell Jimmy Smith, we'll give you a series off. To tell Brandon Carr, we'll give you a series off. I don't think they're going to do that a ton. I think Jimmy Smith's still going to mostly be on the field. I think for now, anyway, Brandon Carr is going to mostly be on the field.
Yeah, I looked out there at one point. Smith wasn't out there. I was looking like, did he get hurt? Literally. Yeah. And this is going to be part of their rotation, which, it's sort of a kind of a sensible thing to do if you don't get burned, right? And certainly in the fourth quarter, if you need them, and you will, especially if you have a lead because the other team's going to be chucking it around, that, rested guys out there, they have not had that luxury like ever, right?
Right. They haven't been able to have 1 or 2 good corners, let alone having 3 on the outside. So we'll see how it plays out. He has to play well. If Marlon Humphrey comes in and lets the ball go over his head, then I'm guessing you're not going to see Jimmy Smith come off the field then. But, in the meantime, when you're playing some of these early season games or it's a little bit warmer and you have, maybe some conditions that guys start getting tired, maybe there's a situation where Jimmy Smith has to cover 2 9 routes during a series, and then give him the next series off or give him a few plays to catch his breath. That's what they do with D linemen. It's what they do with outside linebackers a lot of times, or what the Ravens have done. If you have another corner that you feel that good about, my goodness, this guy was their first-round pick. I'd hope they feel that good about wanting to get him on the field. Then, it's not a case of being eager to replace Brandon Carr necessarily, although I still wouldn't be surprised if Marlon Humphrey's starting at some point over him later this season. And you kind of hope you see that progression in the same way that you saw it with Dwayne Starks as a first-round corner, in the same way that you saw it with Chris McAllister as a first-round corner. Jimmy Smith was, as we know, is a little bit more of a late bloomer for them. But I like the idea of getting Humphrey on the field a little bit here and there, get his feet wet, get his game legs under him, so to speak, and then you have a guy who is ready to come in and hopefully play at a high level when maybe Jimmy Smith has that injury that keeps him out at some point. As much as you hope he stays healthy, realistically, at 29 years old, he's the kind of guy who it's tough to count on him to play 16 games, which is probably one of the big reasons why they drafted Marlon Humphrey in the first place. So it was good to see that. But overall for this defense was a terrific start. It's the kind of performance overall we hadn't seen in quite some time on the road by a Baltimore defense, but that's got to translate, especially not knowing what this offense is going to look like. I go back to my overall expectations for this season. They need this defense to be a lot better than it was last year. But that said, it's not easy to do that. That was not a bad defense last year. It was a good defense that had a really bad finish last year. But they need that defense to be at an elite level if they're going to get to where they need to go, because at some point, that offense is going to need to score points. That offense is going to have to throw the football more effectively. And until we see it all happen, until we know for sure 100% that Joe Flacco is going to be healthy and upright and in the game, until we see them continue to run the football effectively against other teams, not just the Cincinnati Bengals, there are going to be some question marks there. So if this team's going to get to where it wants to go, meaning being a playoff team, it's going to be mostly because this defense is playing at not just a really good level, but it's going to have to be at a great level. It needs to be that kind of defense that is, at a bare minimum, a top 5 kind of caliber unit.
Week 1 in the books. The Purple Birds, I should say, 1-0 right now. The Browns coming in this week, and of course, we're monitoring all things NFL around here. We leave on a jet plane in the middle of next week for London. We will be at Wembley next week. Big party next Saturday at the Fox at XL on the east side of London in the Docklands area near the Emirates cable car that goes over the River Thames to the O2. We'll be gathering on Saturday from 11 until 3 in London. We'd love to see you there. Don't forget, Wednesday night, this Wednesday night, Greenmount Station, Brandon Williams. That'll be the next show. This week, it's actually Ryan Jensen joining us along with Austin Howard. That's Wednesday night. We'll be swabbing for the bone marrow registry. I was thinking when Brandon came last year and we swabbed for the bone marrow registry. We'll get Brandon out later in the year, but it's all offense this week. So getting the lunch pail guys out on the O-line this week. Swabbing for the bone marrow registry, 7:30, Greenmount Station, Carroll County in Hampstead. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.